Chosen one, when ancient language speaks of a guardian awakening, it is not forecasting retaliation. It is describing a shift in boundary clarity, the moment when tolerance ends and structure returns. Guardians in myth are not weapons. They are regulators. They do not strike in anger. They enforce alignment by removing access to what no longer belongs. Wrath, in this language, is not harm. It is consequence becoming unavoidable. It is the world stopping its habit of compensating for disrespect, exploitation, or imbalance. When protection awakens, the chaos does not get attacked. It loses permission. Things that fed on ambiguity cannot survive precision. That is what people fear, and why they use dramatic words for something that is actually procedural. You may already feel this change. Conflict stops reaching you. Disrespect collapses before confrontation. Manipulation fails without effort. These are not acts of destruction, they are closures. Doors that used to open by pressure now remain sealed by clarity. Those who relied on your silence, patience, or self-doubt to operate freely now encounter friction where there was once passage. This is not vengeance. It is calibration. The guardian awakening is internal before it is external. Your nervous system stops rationalizing what it should never have negotiated. You don't argue boundaries anymore because the boundary is finally in place. The energy once spent maintaining peace at your expense returns to structure. That return changes the field around you. People feel it as resistance where they expected access. They call it wrath because they are meeting integrity without loopholes. Notice the shift in how outcomes materialize. Situations resolve without your involvement. Narratives collapse without rebuttal. Attempts to provoke you fall flat, not because you suppressed emotion, but because the invitation never landed. This is protection doing its real work, ending cycles without creating new ones. In mythic terms, a guardian awakens when the carrier no longer has to perform vigilance. The system takes over. The need to explain, justify, or endure abuse disappears. Not dramatically, efficiently. Protection becomes ambient. Like gravity, it sets limits quietly. People don't get punished. They self-correct or move away. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. This is why fear spreads when guardianship activates. Not fear of violence, fear of accountability. When ambiguity ends, behavior must choose a side. Those who lived comfortably in gray zones feel exposed. They mistake exposure for threat. But exposure here is simply light without commentary. What cannot stand in light calls it wrath and retreat. Your role now is restraint, not reaction. Do not perform righteousness. Do not seek moral victory. Do not dramatize consequence. Let consequence happen cleanly, impersonally, and without your narration. Guardians don't posture. They hold. Understand the nuance carefully. No one must be harmed for justice to occur. Justice, in this frame, is access management. Who gets near? Who influences? Who participates? When those parameters lock into place, harm stops proliferating on its own. That is the function the myth protects. This is also why peace returns after, not before, protection awakens. Peace without boundary is fragile. Boundary without violence is durable. You are entering durable peace, the kind that does not ask you to shrink to maintain it. If others face wrath, what they are actually facing is the end of exemption. Old dynamics that depended on your patience, blindness, or delay are no longer subsidized. Systems rebalance. Relationships reprice themselves. Consequences align with actions. not your tolerance. Hold this truth steady so you do not misread your own strength. Protection is not aggression. Wrath is not revenge. Awakening is not escalation. This is closure becoming non-negotiable. Remain quiet. Remain precise. Remain human. What moves now is not your anger, but your boundary, finally intact. Chosen one, when people speak of divine wrath, what they are reacting to is not punishment, it is disconnection. Wrath in symbolic language is the sensation of doors closing where entitlement once existed. No blow is struck. No threat is made. What disappears is unearned proximity. Those who relied on loopholes feel sudden resistance and interpret resistance as hostility. But resistance here is simply reality correcting its own boundaries. This is why the experience feels personal to others while remaining impersonal to you. Nothing is being aimed. What is no longer allowed simply stops working. The accommodations you once provided, your patience, your benefit of the doubt, your quiet endurance, are no longer converted into passage. Without those conversions, pressure cannot travel. Pressure collapses at the point of contact and retreats to safer ground. In mythic frameworks, this is the guardian's work. Guardians do not intervene emotionally. They enforce conditions. When conditions change, behavior must update or exit. Those who adapt stay calm. Those who resist escalate. The escalation is not caused by you. It is caused by the loss of an advantage they mistook for permanence. You may notice this most clearly in relationships that once felt asymmetrical. Conversations that used to dominate now shorten. Demands lose traction. Manipulation arrives and finds no purchase. This can feel like silence has sharpened. It hasn't. Silence has finally been allowed to mean no. Where no was once softened, explained, or delayed, it is now immediate and non-negotiable. That speed feels like force to those accustomed to negotiation. Another signal of this phase is administrative calm. Things resolve through policy rather than personality. Systems intervene before conflict reaches you. Decisions that used to drag now finalize upstream. This is protection becoming structural. When protection becomes structural, wrath becomes unnecessary because harm never gains momentum. Importantly, nothing here requires you to change your temperament. You do not become colder or harsher. If anything, you become simpler, direct, consistent. You stop volunteering energy to keep imbalanced situations afloat. The world notices not because you are louder, but because absence of subsidy is suddenly felt. This is the moment where restraint proves its value. Restraint ensures that consequence stays clean. Clean consequence invites correction rather than retaliation. Those who can adjust will adjust. Those who cannot will drift out of range. Both outcomes reduce harm without spectacle. That is the only kind of justice guardianship recognizes. Understand also why fear circulates in stories at this point. Fear spreads among those who confuse control with safety. When control is removed, fear invents narratives to explain the loss. Wrath becomes a word for not getting what they expected. Do not correct them. Explanation would turn structural alignment into personal conflict. Let misinterpretation burn itself out on consistency. Internally, this phase consolidates something essential. You stop anticipating other people's reactions. Anticipation was the final tether to old dynamic. Without it, energy returns to presence. You act when action is correct. You stop when it is not. Your body relaxes because it no longer braces for impact that never arrived. Here is the operational truth to hold steady. No one is being targeted. No score is being settled. No anger is required. What's happening is the end of exemptions. Exemptions are fragile systems. Boundaries are stable systems. The Guardian's awakening marks the handoff from tolerance to order. Order is not loud. It does not threaten. It simply refuses to bend. And when bending stops, pressure reveals itself as unsustainable and withdraws. Remain consistent. Remain ordinary. Remain precise. You are not meant to wield this shift, only to live inside it. The less you dramatize it, the faster balance returns to everyone involved. Wrath dissolves when it is understood correctly. Protection remains. There comes a point where explanation becomes interference, not because truth is hidden, but because truth no longer needs assistance. This is where the Guardian's presence is felt most clearly, not as action, but as the absence of escalation. Situations that once demanded your words resolve themselves. Arguments dissolve before forming. What used to circle you now passes around, as if sensing a closed radius. This phase is quieter than people expect and far more effective than confrontation ever was. When consequence matures, it carries its own authority. It moves faster than persuasion and cleaner than rebuttal. The Guardian does not speak for you. It removes the conditions that required you to speak at all. What remains is a field where behavior meets outcome without intermediaries. You will notice timing improve first. Delays lift. Complications reroute. Decisions finalize without your emotional investment. This is not luck. It's alignment reclaiming efficiency. When boundaries are intact, systems don't waste energy negotiating what is no longer open. Efficiency feels like favor to those who relied on friction as leverage. They misname it wrath because they feel the sudden contrast. Your role here is deceptively simple and therefore difficult. Do not reinsert yourself. Old reflexes try to step in, explain, soften, manage perception, absorb impact. Resist that impulse. Management kept the imbalance alive. Absence lets order work. The Guardian's effectiveness depends on your restraint. Commentary would turn structure back into personality. There is also an internal recalibration happening. Your attention detaches from reaction and returns to selection. You choose where to place time, not where to place defense. You choose what to build, not what to block. This reallocation of attention is the real protection. When attention moves upstream, downstream problems starve. Notice how your body responds. Less bracing. Shallower urgency. A steadier breath. These are signals that the environment no longer requires hypervigilance. Protection that arrives late is dramatic. Protection that arrives on time feels almost boring. Boring is good. Boring means systems are carrying what individuals used to shoulder. Some will test the boundary once, often unconsciously. It won't escalate. Their attempt meets nothing. No echo. No opening. That silence is unmistakable. It teaches faster than any explanation. Afterwards, behavior either updates or exit. Neither outcome requires your involvement. What's essential to understand is that this is not a phase to optimize. Do not attempt to use the Guardian to win, teach, or correct. Use collapse's neutrality. Neutrality is what keeps consequences proportional. When neutrality holds, outcomes are accepted rather than contested. That acceptance reduces collateral damage for everyone. You may feel a subtle grief here, not for what's lost, but for the version of you that worked so hard to keep things together. Let that grief pass without story. Effort ends when structure arrives. Effort was never your calling. Stewardship is. Stewardship looks like choosing less and keeping it intact. Here's the stabilizing truth to carry forward. When consequence no longer needs your voice, speech becomes optional. When access is managed structurally, argument becomes irrelevant. Let the world do what it does when clarity is present. You are not withdrawing compassion, you are withdrawing subsidy. And subsidy was never mercy, it was delay. Remain gentle, remain grounded, remain uninterested in spectacle. What's protecting you now is not intensity, not authority, not anger. It is finalized geometry. Lines drawn cleanly stay clean without maintenance. That is how the guardian works, not by force, but by finishing what should never have been negotiable. What changes next is not your behavior, but the behavior of others once flexibility is removed. When a field no longer bends to accommodate pressure, whatever was leaning on it must suddenly support its own weight. This is where clarity becomes diagnostic. People don't fail because you set a boundary. They fail because they were never balanced to begin with. You will observe this without involvement. Some individuals recalibrate immediately. Their tone adjusts. Their expectations reset. Interaction simplifies instead of escalating. These are people capable of alignment. They were not dependent on advantage, they were merely accustomed to it. Once advantage disappears, respect replaces it. Quietly, without conversation, others react differently. They misinterpret stability as hostility, precision as judgment, distance as threat. This reaction is automatic and revealing. It exposes who relied on ambiguity to operate and who can stand inside structure without panic. Nothing is being exposed deliberately. The environment is simply no longer compensating for instability. This phase can feel unsettling if you mistake revelation for conflict. It isn't. Conflict requires engagement. What's happening now is sorting without struggle. Systems naturally filter when conditions tighten. No hand is needed. You are not choosing who stays or goes. Behavior makes that decision on its own. It's important to remain emotionally neutral here. Do not read motive. Do not assign villainy. When pressure surfaces flaws, that surfacing is not cruelty, it's information. Compassion does not require you to reintroduce flexibility that caused damage. Compassion includes allowing people to meet reality without cushions that distort outcomes. You may also notice an unusual calm when relationships or opportunities end in this season. Not relief, clarity. The ending does not feel dramatic because nothing exploded. It simply stopped fitting. That is how clean alignment endings feel. Dramatic endings belong to imbalanced systems correcting too late. Another subtle shift appears in authority structures around you. Oversight becomes lighter. Trust increases without explanation. This is not favoritism, it is pattern recognition. Systems recognize when a node is stable and reduce friction automatically. Stability attracts autonomy. Autonomy attracts fewer interruptions. This is protection becoming invisible. Be careful not to interpret this as moral superiority. Stability is not virtue, it is maintenance achieved. Anyone can reach it with discipline and time. You simply arrived early because the cost of delay was higher for you. Early arrival is not elevation, it is necessity. What matters most now is pacing. Do not accelerate just because resistance has decreased. Reduced resistance invites overextension if misunderstood. Move at the same measured speed. Let steadiness remain boring. Boredom is an indicator that excess has been removed. Where boredom exists, risk is low. You may feel tempted to re-engage old patterns out of empathy or habit. Resist. Reentry teaches the wrong lesson, to them and to the system. Consistency teaches far more than generosity at this stage. Generosity returns later, once stability proves permanent. Hold this operational truth clearly. When the field stops bending, truth stops hiding. You are not responsible for what truth reveals. You are responsible only for not interfering with it. Allow behavior to speak. Allow distance to do its work. Allow calm to replace control. The guardian does not need reinforcement. It functions through unchanging conditions. What rearranges now does so quietly, without scenes, without declarations, without you at the center. That is not loss. That is order resuming its natural shape. After sorting occurs, what replaces turbulence is not excitement but sobriety. This is the phase most people misunderstand because it lacks drama. Power, once stabilized, does not announce itself. It simplifies life instead of intensifying it. Decisions become fewer but cleaner. Options narrow, yet outcomes improve. The guardian's presence is felt as reduced noise, not heightened force. You may notice that your days carry more continuity. Interruptions lose momentum. Urgency fades without being replaced by stagnation. This is what happens when defense energy is reclaimed and reinvested into structure. You stop reacting and start operating. Operating feels less emotional and more precise. Precision can feel cold if you're used to chaos, but it is actually compassionate at scale. It prevents collateral damage. This phase demands maturity because it removes the feedback loops that once made you feel necessary. When things work without your intervention, identity can feel momentarily thin. Don't fill that space with performance. Let it remain empty. Emptiness here is not loss. It is capacity freed from misuse. The guardian awakens fully when you trust that absence of crisis is not a lack of meaning. You will also notice a change in how responsibility arrives. It comes earlier and smaller. Small signals replace big warnings. Minor adjustments prevent major fallout. This early warning system is a sign of alignment consolidated. Ancient language called this favor. Modern words would call it error correction latency. Problems are caught before becoming problems. That is not luck. It is coherence working ahead of impact. Be attentive to habits now. Stable power requires stable rhythms. Sleep, nutrition, work boundaries, and recovery are no longer negotiable without consequence. When capacity is present, the body becomes the first line of governance. Neglect there creates distortions downstream. Care here is not self-indulgence. It is infrastructure maintenance. Another subtle shift appears in how others initiate with you. Requests become clearer. Ambiguity reduces. Fewer people test edges because edges are now plainly visible. This may feel like distance, but it is actually respect recalibrated. Hidden guardians produce visible manners. You did not demand this. Conditions did. Do not mistake effectiveness for isolation. Isolation is withdrawal. Effectiveness is selectivity. Selectivity preserves energy and improves outcomes for everyone involved. The goal here is not to accumulate influence but to reduce unnecessary contact. Influence increases naturally when noise decreases. Let that increase remain incidental. There will be moments when you remember older patterns, how hard things used to feel, how much effort went into managing others' reactions. Let those memories pass without story. Nostalgia for chaos is common when calm takes over. Calm feels unfamiliar at first. Stay with it. Familiarity will come. Here is the principle that keeps this phase intact. Stable power prefers duration over intensity. Intensity exhausts systems. Duration sustains them. Choose actions you can repeat. Decline choices that require constant effort to maintain. Favor paths that ask for steadiness, not vigilance. As sobriety settles, you may feel less chosen and more responsible. That is correct. Chosenness without responsibility is myth. Responsibility without spectacle is reality. This is where the Guardian's work becomes permanent, by making itself unnecessary in day-to-day consciousness. Nothing needs to escalate now. Nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be defended. What remains is a life that functions with fewer corrections and less drag. That is not anticlimax. That is success defined correctly. Stay exact. Stay rested. Stay uninterested in noise. Power, once stabilized, does not need attention. It needs maintenance. And maintenance, done quietly, outlasts every display. Eventually, the test stops looking like a test. There are no enemies to confront, no speeches to give, no choices that feel cinematic. What appears instead is temptation disguised as expansion. Invitations arrive that seem beneficial but would reintroduce noise. Opportunities present themselves that promise scale but would fracture rhythm. This is where discernment replaces strength. Most people fail here, not through wrongdoing, but through overreach. When resistance fades, it is easy to assume acceleration is required. It is not. Acceleration without necessity reopens instability. The Guardian's work depends on you maintaining pace. Pace is not slowness, it is measured continuity. Moving faster than coherence can support creates turbulence where none existed. At this stage, silence becomes an active discipline. Speaking less is not withdrawal, it is filtration. Words now shape realities faster than before. Careless language creates unintended obligations. Excess explanation produces emotional debt. Precision becomes a form of respect for yourself and for the systems responding to you. You may notice that praise arrives without context. People respond positively without being able to say why. Accept this neutrally. Do not absorb it as fuel and do not reject it as discomfort. Neutral reception keeps the field stable. Emotional spikes, positive or negative, reintroduce volatility. Stability requires evenness. This is also where boundaries move from explicit to implicit. You no longer need to articulate them. They are felt. When someone crosses one, correction occurs through mismatch rather than confrontation. Interactions shorten. Momentum stalls. The Guardian's presence makes misalignment inefficient before it becomes personal. There will be moments when you wonder if something should feel bigger. That question itself is residue from earlier narratives that equated impact with drama. Impact measured correctly feels proportional. Proportional things last. Overstated things break. Understand clearly, restraint is not hiding. It is calibration. You are not withholding truth. You are refusing distortion. Distortion always begins where excess appears useful. What you decline now saves repair later. This is not moral, it is structural. Pay attention to what no longer appeals to you. Chaos once felt energizing. Crisis once gave meaning. Now they feel inefficient. That shift confirms integration. When excitement detaches from instability, you are no longer recruitable by disorder. That is the Guardian's deepest function. It may feel anticlimactic because the mind expects a conclusion, but completion often appears as simplicity, fewer decisions, clearer priorities, unbroken routines. These are not small outcomes. They are rare outcomes in systems prone to escalation. A practical truth must anchor you here. The more quietly protection works, the less it needs to exist as an idea. Do not tell yourself a story about being guarded. Act as though guardrails simply exist, because they do. Eat well. Rest enough. Work cleanly. Decline politely. These mundane acts are the seal. Extraordinary maintenance is the final expression of alignment. When life looks ordinary and outcomes improve, the myth has fully released its grip. Nothing dramatic must happen now. And because of that, nothing dramatic will happen to you. This is not the absence of power. It is power made livable. Remain steady. Let time accumulate. Allow boring success to compound. The guardian does not roar at this stage. It keeps gates closed without sound. At the end of this sequence, nothing announces itself. There is no visible hand, no dramatic reversal, no public reckoning. What settles instead is normalcy under protection. And that is how you know the guardian has fully awakened, not because something attacks but because nothing can. Life resumes its ordinary rhythm, yet the friction that once drained you no longer attaches. Situations that used to escalate now stall early. People who once pressed now pause. Systems that once lagged now respond with little effort. None of this feels miraculous in the moment. It feels inevitable. Inevitability is the signature of structure holding. This is where the language of wrath finally loses relevance. Wrath required distance between action and consequence. Distance allowed abuse to accumulate. Now consequence is immediate enough that abuse never gains traction. No anger is needed. No correction is issued. The environment simply refuses to carry what is misaligned. You may test this unintentionally, by waiting to react where you once would have intervened. You'll notice that outcomes still resolve. Sometimes better. That observation is the final confirmation. Your vigilance is no longer the price of peace. Peace is now maintained by conditions, not endurance. At this stage, identity fully steps back. You no longer think of yourself as guarded, protected, chosen, or threatened. Those concepts have done their work and are no longer useful. What replaces them is trust in the ordinary. Trust that routine holds. Trust that no explanation is required. Trust that order does not need your supervision. Here is the quiet closure ancient stories never dramatized enough. Protection that endures does not feel powerful. It feels boring. Boredom here is safety. Safety allows attention to move from defense to creation, from survival to refinement. You begin choosing what to build rather than what to prevent. That shift is the true release. People around you adjust permanently now. Not cautiously, habitually. Boundaries are assumed. Tone is set before words are spoken. You are no longer an exception that needs managing. You are a constant others account for instinctively. This is not reverence. It is integration. Integration is the endpoint of every guardian narrative. You will stop noticing the change because it no longer changes. That is how stability announces itself, by disappearing into daily life. When weeks pass without disturbance and months compound without drama, the task is complete. Do not look back for proof. Proof belongs to earlier phases. Now, consistency is the only evidence that matters. And consistency cannot be faked. It can only be lived. Carry this forward plainly. Nothing is hunting anyone. Nothing is being punished. Nothing needs to be said out loud. What once required vigilance now requires maintenance only. Your responsibility is no longer to hold the line. The line holds itself. Live well. Rest normally. Build carefully. Let the story end where it always was meant to end, in a human life that is no longer destabilized by what it carries. Protection did not make you dangerous. It made danger irrelevant. That is the quiet victory myths never learned how to celebrate, because it leaves no debris, no spectacle, and no one to fear. And that is why it lasts.